Nobody likes a rat. That was the title of a 2013 paper from Columbia University, which dealt with this perplexing phenomenon whereby individuals who refuse to collude with a lie often end up shunned by their peer group, even when their peer group is made up of individuals who would, in other contexts, consider themselves to be perfectly honest. And that reflects the social paradox of whistleblowers. So going public with wrongdoing in either the private or the public sector might seem to be uncontroversially the right thing to do. But we've repeatedly seen that in practice, whistleblowing is no easy ticket to acclaim. In fact, all too often, it's the opposite. Individual whistleblowers have been accused, both in South Africa and elsewhere, of harboring personal grudges, of seeking financial gain, of even being in the grip of mental illness. They've been characterized as treasonous and deemed permanently unemployable. But despite these significant disincentives to doing the right thing, there are still people around in this country as well who are willing to stand up and say, not in our name. And in our recent history, we owe an incalculable debt, really, to the handful of individuals who went public with their behind-the-scenes knowledge on state capture. So later today, we're going to hear for the first time from the individuals who leaked the trove of emails from within the Gupta empire that we now know as the Gupta leaks. We labeled those whistleblowers the Daily Maverick Persons of the Year 2017, together with two other whistleblowers who are here with us today. And they are two women who lifted the lid at great personal cost. And I think it's going to become clear in the course of our discussion just how great that cost was. They lifted the lid on state capture. And that is the former CEO at Trillian, Bianca Goodson, and the former head of legal at Eskom, Suzanne Daniels. To help us explore the current reality for whistleblowers in South Africa, we also have with us Gabriella Razzano, who is the Executive Director of the Open Democracy Advice Center, also a distant relative of Daisy DeMelka, we just heard, well done, and my Daily Maverick colleague, Jessica Bezuidenhout, who is from our investigative unit, Scorpio. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to these amazing women. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. I hope I'm not saying too much when I reveal that there are very nervous people on this panel, which seems, again, completely counterintuitive. You do the right thing in South Africa, and you're up here trembling on stage, and other charlatans are out here just living their best lives. But thank you so much. We know, we really do owe you guys an enormous amount, and Bianca and Suzanne, really, I think we could give them another round of applause. So to start off with, we're going to ask Gabriella to kick us off just by sketching the current landscape when it comes to whistleblowing in this country, their status, their protections, and so forth. Take it away.
Sure. Hi. So I'll skip through the stuff relatively quickly. Just so you know, I'm not nervous. Part of the joy of being related to a serial killer is those genes are bred out. So,
awesome.
So, whistleblowing. In South Africa, the main law which protects whistleblowers is called the Protected Disclosures Act. The Protected Disclosures Act defines a whistleblower as an employee or worker who makes a disclosure in the appropriate way. I think for us, we all understand whistleblowing a bit broader than the law does. Looking at something like a person who makes public a disclosure of corruption or wrongdoing. And I think it's always important to know that moves beyond corruption. It's about disclosures about sexual harassment. It's about disclosures about environmental damage. Basically, whistleblowers are the people who tell us what's wrong in the world. And that's part of the reason why we value them so much. To give you an outline of why it's important, PricewaterhouseCoopers tells us that 77% of South African businesses experience economic crime. 18% of businesses spend between 2 and 10 times as much investigating fraud than is lost by fraud. They'd spend a lot less if they valued and protected their whistleblowers. And to talk about the protections that are available, we have the Protected Disclosures Act, which provides labor protections for whistleblowers. So basically, if you make a disclosure, you can't be fired. In order to get those protections, you have to follow a very particular legal path. For instance, making the disclosure to your employer or to an attorney. Or you can make a generally protected disclosure to the public, but then the bar's a bit higher about what you have to do to still get those protections. There were recent amendments made to the law which have also included now protections against civil and criminal liability as well. We haven't been able to explore what that looks like, but it's an exciting advancement and something that my organization fought for 15 years. There are other laws that protect whistleblowers in a way. The Companies Act provides some protections. Suzanne will speak about that a little. The National Environmental Management Act provides some protection. I suppose technically the Witness Protection Act provides some protections, but not really. And then the reality for whistleblowers, what does that look like, though apparently we have some laws? Well, Corruption Watch reports that in 2017 they had over 5,000 people trying to disclose corruption to them. As an organization, a very small organization, we help between 150 to 200 whistleblowers every year, but the number is obviously far, far bigger. There are a lot of people trying to do the right thing in spite of a huge amount of setbacks, which I always admire. The environment is not a pleasant one for those people. Selga reports that 60% of councillors experience threats. There were 159 assassinations in South Africa in 2017. Some of those we know were linked to whistleblowing. We've dealt with the son of a whistleblower, Tlolo Pakwe, whose father, Mos Pakwe, was assassinated in 2009. And still little has been done to bring the perpetrators of those crimes to justice. So in spite of this environment where it's dangerous, where people feel intimidated and scared, the law doesn't do enough. The cases brought in terms of the PDA show that there's a relatively even split between people who bring cases from the public sector and the private sector, because it's everybody needs to get their house in order. And 60% of those cases in courts were successful. For me, what's more interesting is that over 90% of the cases that were brought were shown to be based on real claims. So in other words, nobody's lying, they're not fake, it's not bull. And the reason why that's important is because there's still a perception that likes to be perpetuated by people that isn't a real one, that there are a lot of liars. There are a lot of people who expose themselves to this extreme danger on a whim or on a vendetta. And when those amendments were made to the Protected Disclosures Act that I talked about, one of the changes that was made was the creation of a criminal offense for people who falsely disclose. And we fought back very hard against that for a number of reasons. One of them is it's the chilling effect, and the other is that it's bizarrely out of sync with best practice. And the other is that, people who make false disclosures aren't protected by the law anyway. But I think why it's important to notice that is because even the law put in place to protect whistleblowers has been changed to not respect what they do. And I think that's a sad indictment of where South Africa views what whistleblowers are doing. Whistleblowers are a group of amazingly brave people doing the country a great service. And I think there's a lot more that needs to be done to keep them safe.
Thank you so much. So that's the general backdrop against which Suzanne and Bianca took the decision to blow the whistle. And before we hear a bit more about their personal experiences, I'm going to ask Jessica to give us a bit of context, the specific context that led to the whistleblowing in these cases.
So about 18 months ago or so, very few people had heard the name Trillian Capital Partners, right? Well, we've got on stage here two black women, highly qualified, one a lawyer with over 20 years of experience, a techno-economist. I had to ask for an explanation of what exactly that is, that are both unemployed. So you kind of think, okay, what gets us here? But we've had, both of them have been on this sort of journey of hell since making a decision to come out and help us, whether it's MB, Daily Maverick, the Sunday Times, or wherever, to kind of piece together the different pieces of that puzzle. How we, as taxpayers, ended up coughing up $1.6 billion to McKinsey and Trillian. The media always had bits of that information. Had it not been for the information these two brought to light, at grave risk, or information that the Nenegate whistleblower, Mosilo Matepo, revealed, I don't know where we would be. I mean, the toll on people's lives, I've been quite fortunate in a way to sort of have covered not just the information that as the media we've been able to acquire from people like them, but also the personal journeys associated with doing what they've done. You'll all by now have either read or heard that Suzanne has been fired by Eskom because it does not buy her status as a whistleblower. It does not value the fact that she's gone to Parliament and revealed extensive details on the McKinsey Trillian deal, on the prepayment for coal that helped the Guptas to buy Optimum coal mine, among other things, in great technical detail. So we have to wonder, we were all up in arms about state capture. Where would we be had it not been for people like them? So, I mean, I think as a start, maybe we could start with you just sort of taking us into that space, which I know is incredibly hard for you.
Well, Jess, I think my journey started in 2015 already. I climbed the ladder quite fast, well, in Eskom terms. Those of you know, I was not always the head of legal. I started 12 years ago
Take your time.
as a junior employee. And I was actually congratulated by my colleagues for showing them that an ordinary person, by working hard, can get to the top. I think, my first experience was meeting Mr. Salim Essa. And I remember being made very aware from that day onwards that I've been watched, that my phone was tapped, and that they knew my movements. And the fear didn't sink in at that moment. For me, it was like, no, nobody can control South Africa like that. There's no way You know, the skeptical lawyer in me said, there's just no way. The unfolding few days showed me when my colleagues were suspended in exactly the way that this man had told me a couple of days ago. I was like, I was told not to swear, so I'm not going to swear.
No, you must. Who told you that?
I didn't tell you that.
Nonsense.
But it was like, oh my God, you know, what have I stepped into? And then the journey began, because one didn't know who to trust, who not to trust. And I had the additional duty of, you know, this extra confidentiality. I was the person defending Eskom. I mean, I was the person at the front line when the board needed, when people needed answers on the board and the board stuff. I think, you know, and then the Amabungani article with the famous spider diagram. And there were lots of things, and you sort of think, and you know, my skepticism was always, I didn't see this in the boardroom. I didn't see everybody sitting and saying, okay, so-and-so said we have to vote this way. There was the bickering, there was the, you know, the criticizing of the company secretary, which always happens. You know, I didn't order the right coffee or the right car, you know, and my minutes were funny, but that was the life. But I was made exceptionally clear by executives that you are being followed, you know, not in so many words. And I think that's the context that people forget. Now, you know, one gets asked questions like, why did you only come out when you did? You know, it took a hell of a lot for me to get to that point where it was actually, for me, I started defending Eskom on a daily basis. And I think for me, the groundbreaking moment was, I had a tiff with, I hope he's not here today. I had a tiff with Sikonati Manchancha from the Business Day. And I was horrified at the questions he was asking me, because, I mean, he was covering Eskom when it wasn't sexy. But the email, I was like, this damn journalist, can't he just go away? You know, because at Eskom we are taught, journalists, you are the enemy. And he started, and I've told him, you know, and I'm happy to say publicly, he pricked my conscience. He pricked the way that I looked at things. Because as it's very easy. It's very easy as a lawyer to say, this is my instructions, this is what I need to do. And obviously later, the Gupta leaks came out. I was very fortunate. I had to take my daughter overseas. I downloaded all of those Gupta leaks. I downloaded all of the newspaper articles. I downloaded all of my files. And I actually spent, because my daughter was an aspiring actor, so parents have to be on set. So, you know, I was not sitting up here, I was in the back. And while she was doing her thing, I was reading and piecing together. And it was the first time that I've been able to step away completely from the Eskom environment and look at things and say, what is actually going on here? You know, I mean, I recall a colleague saying to me, because we were dealing with some financial issues, that he noted the change in my attitude. You know, because the realization came during that time, piecing all the stuff together, that there was this whole other world that we just did not know about, you know. And I think when I came back, it was even harder because I still had to go to work. you know, and now I've got all of this information. I started sensing that, you know, the board members were sort of suspicious, especially when I publicly stated we lied about the Trillian payments. You know, that for me was like, I'm going to do this irrespective of the consequences. You know, I have to. It was just fortunate that it was the journalists from the Sunday Times. I think the other one was Amabungani, and you know, another, I think it was the Business Day, and all three newspapers were like on the phone. What do you mean? What do you say? You know, all of those things. And they ran, and that was a game changer for me and for the reporting, because suddenly, you know, I had access to people who would report the truth and not just make headlines. But that didn't get the reaction that I thought we would. I mean, I started being harassed at work. I got moved from one job to the other. I got, you know, it got so bad, I used to check my car every night because we had dedicated parking. I mean, can you imagine? I felt like I was in an FBI movie. Sweeping my car, checking that nobody's following me, and all those things. I went to see my lawyer. It was weird, eh? A lawyer having a lawyer. And, you know, the surprising thing is, I didn't know about the Public Disclosures Act, or the Protected Disclosures Act, until it happened to me. High-flying corporate lawyer, and I didn't know about these protections. It was a surprise for me. I was excited about the parliamentary inquiry. I prepared thoroughly for it. I spent a lot of time with the case presenter, taking him through all those documents that you saw that I had. And that was the factual explanation. You know, but one doesn't get, I know that, I think Natasha Mazzoni asked me about what did it do to you personally. I mean, I can remember from about the middle of August, the death threats started, the harassment on the road, you know, all knowing that Parliament was coming up, you know, the attacks at home, we had a number of break-ins. I've lived in the same house for about 11 years. There was nothing. All of a sudden, the attacks on my daughter from school, luckily, you know, just to scare us. I've had some very interesting people intercepting my alarm system. You know, I was thinking Wi-Fi is great, but it allows people to hack into your things. And, you know, life became about security. My family found out, like the rest of South Africa, when I went to Parliament, about what I was dealing with. And it was like, oh, that explains your behavior for the last 2 years. You know, you were introvert. By the time I got home, I was just too quiet. And I mean, and the takeaway from Parliament for me, you know, people reported on me meeting the barefoot Ajay Gupta. Instead of focusing on what I said, I've subsequently learned from, you know, my journalist friends, you know, we have to make headlines. But journalists, my message is you must remember that there are people behind these headlines.
Let me stop you there for now. Thank you so much. I'm going to pick up on a few things. Thank you, Suzanne. So just quickly to pick on a few things before we get to you, Bianca. Gabriella, Suzanne raised something significant there, which is whistleblowers who come forward at what is considered to be a later stage in the erosion of, say, a public institution, are often greeted with tremendous skepticism. People say, well, to what degree is this whistleblowing as much as it is simply jumping ship when you realize the jig is up. Are those concerns ever justified, and how should we manage our perceptions of that situation?
I have quite strong feelings on that kind of perception. I have strong feelings on everything, but on this particularly so. I think that the motives of people are always questioned when they're doing something different and special, and it really doesn't matter. So what if part of the reason she disclosed is because she secretly hates Barry down in the, like, Barry's a bit of a turd, I'm sure Barry is. But that doesn't matter. What she's disclosing is of importance. The substance of what she's saying is so important. And I think it's a very easy tactic to try and deride who she is, rather than deal with the problem. And the problem is something that everybody contributed to. And that's, I think, what people struggle with. The second you acknowledge these kinds of disclosures, you have to acknowledge how you were complicit in creating an environment in which this kind of stuff could happen. So, yeah, it's not uncommon, but it's completely unjustified.
I just want to come in there. The Gupta leaks kind of put the Gupta name on everyone's lips, right? But for many years before then, the Guptas were, of course, if a minister got a call to say, hey, you got to show up, the minister would go. Most ministers did go. We know that today. But a lot of people, members of the public, didn't really know about the pulling power of the Guptas. So if Suzanne Daniels, or any other whistleblower for that matter, only became alert to the real power of Mr. Barefoot Ajay at a little apartment in Melrose Arch, in 2016, I don't know how critical we should be of that, because the Gupta leaks and a lot of investigations sort of associated around state capture has really pushed the Guptas into the public domain, but for a long time, they were the power behind the scenes. Suzanne explained to me sort of the moment when she goes for coffee with Salim Essa, who clearly had some power, as she had discovered earlier. In the middle of this whole crisis, she gets asked to come for coffee, and she goes for two reasons. She's curious, because, hell, there's a lot going on now. She gets there, and she gets told, oh, by the way, we're going to go somewhere else. And this is where they end up in that little apartment.
Well, I think it was, just walking in, because I walked in first. And I was like, I thought it was an office building, to be quite honest. So, okay, there's this big screen TV, and there's people sitting. And I look, and I'm stepping, and I'm kind of thinking, oh my goodness, that's Duduzane Zuma. That's one of the Gupta brothers. And that's a minister. And there was this lady that looked like a banker. Can't remember her. I just really can't remember her name. Because by that time, I thought, no, this can't be happening. I must now just stay calm. People ask me, why didn't you take a selfie? Imagine taking a... They thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And what fascinated me was, and then I came to be introduced to him, the manner in which Ajay Gupta spoke. That was the defining moment for me, when I realized that we are not in control of our country. Sure. We are being fooled. That was, I was telling the journalists that I was determined. I actually wanted to call a media conference. I couldn't wait for Parliament, because that moment, when I realized that, and the absolute deference with which Duduzane Zuma, Salim Essa, the other people were treating this man. And that's why for me it was shocking, because he was in a tracksuit.
Suzanne, we could hear from you all day, but we've got very little time remaining already, and we have to get to Bianca. Bianca, take us through What led to your Damascus moment? Why did you pull the trigger, and what's happened to you since?
Okay, so there is never a discrete moment. I don't think it is. I think it's a bit of a process. So my story is very different from Suzanne's. I worked for Trillian for 3 months, and then I resigned. And by the time I resigned, I think the only stuff about the Guptas that was in the media at the time was the wedding thing and the advisors to Van Rooyen at the time. So I was one of those people that Jessica was describing. So I resigned at the back of suspicion, which was triggered by a week of weirdness, which finally culminated in the Bank of Baroda incident, right? I was instructed to open up a Bank of Baroda account and sign all the powers of that account that had a 300 million rand overdraft facility to a person that I didn't know. So I wasn't that stupid, right? And up until that point, I mean, you know, when I explain what happens afterwards, I mean, I really went through a process of thinking that I really am stupid. But that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But there was a whole bunch of things that happened prior to that. You know, so many people ask, what was the moment? There's never a moment. Because you go to work and you see something that's a little bit dodgy, but you start thinking to yourself, okay, maybe I'm being paranoid. I know I'm tired. Let me just wait and see if it happens again. So you go to work again and you see something maybe 2 days later and you think to yourself, okay, but it's not related. You know, so there's these tiny things that start coming up. And to yourself, it's not justified for you to act until everyone has a moment, I guess. And for mine, it was that week with the Bank of Baroda thing. Anyway, so I resigned on a Saturday morning. I was married at the time, and my husband's like, he's got my back, it's all cool, resigned. We both were unemployed. That week was the most amazing thing, and this is how I know God was with me, because that week following, it was the Thursday after I resigned, the Bungani article came out with Transnet on the one side, Eskom on the other side, all the Shane Stanleys and board of directors, all that. Is that the spider thing that you were talking about? Okay, that spider thing came out. And that's now news, like, oh my gosh, I resigned at the right time. I resigned on suspicion, but it's done now. So I was just grateful that I had left. And then, and this is where the media put the fear of God in me afterwards, because I found out more about the hole that I was in through the media. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't even know if I did anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because I hadn't gone to a lawyer. I didn't even know what the Companies Act was. I mean, I'd heard about King 3 vaguely somewhere. But I'm a Bungani and Mail and Guardian, Daily Maverick were relentless in terms of what they were actually bringing out. And every single day I was home, and I got more and more depressed, and I started hating myself more. And I started thinking to myself, what have I done? Who was I in bed with? Had I done anything? Oh my God, this Bank of Baroda account is the vehicle that's going to be used to siphon all this money out of the country. I hated myself. How could that be me? So for 18 months, I couldn't look in the mirror, couldn't blow dry my hair. Seeing people like journalists trying to fight a battle for the country that I was too scared to do, because people told me that I was in danger. I didn't know if I was. I don't know what people do for 10 billion. I can't fathom that amount of money, and that was the value of the contract at Eskom. My husband took a brick and broke the intercom of the house one day because we just didn't want anyone arriving at the house unless they had phoned us to tell us that they were coming. I got advice from one of my family members that my life was in danger and that I didn't know. So nobody told me that it was categorically going to happen, but I had to plan for it. All of this personal strain then results in your marriage falling apart because you have a husband that wants to help you. There are so many people that want to help you, but they can't because they can't relate. You can't even relate because this is not something that happened in the country before. Lawyers can't even relate. You know, I had David Lewis on the one side saying, if you make a public statement, you're going to be the most safest because you're out there in the public. Had another really high-profile attorney saying, oh my God, we must get you a safe house. He has me stuck in the middle and saying, which one's right? Yeah. And all the while, I've got a 5-year-old to look after. You know, and so that was life for 18 months, and that's why it took so long, because you're trying to pay respect to the people that love you, where you know your decision impacts not just you, but others. So eventually, after 18 months, and after a divorce, I got to the point of where Suzanne wanted to do the media conference thing. I threatened my lawyers so many times. I said, I've got this affidavit that I've been preparing for Parliament, and if you guys, if we don't hear back from Parliament now, I'm signing it and I'm going to go drop it off at the nearest police station. And my attorney would just laugh at me, and she'd like use certain curse words to describe my behavior. And she'd be like, there's no way you're doing this. And she's like, why do you want to do this? It's like, I want to pass this monkey off my plate. I don't want to have it on my head anymore. I just want to be a normal person. I want normal traffic problems. You know, all the while, unemployed, got the job at Sage, and it's like, oh gosh, God, I was schizophrenic, right? There was so much stuff happened. And you get the job, and so Sage was awesome. It was a great distraction. And then eventually, after making numerous attempts at the inquiry, the parliamentary inquiry, can I please share my information? Because there were so many false starts now, so I'd lost the will to live, right? We went to the public protector in the year before, and it just, we hoped that the report would have more impetus than it did, and it didn't. Helped Jeff Badlender, also hoping that his report would have more impetus than it did, and it didn't. So I had all these false starts thinking, okay, it's over now, it's over now. It wasn't over. And then the parliamentary inquiry came up, and I'm like, okay, it's over now, for real. And first we submitted saying, okay, I want to appear. Contacted them back, and said, my stuff got lost in the mail. Did it again. My stuff got lost in the mail, and I was like, well, that's it, I'm not waiting for you. I'm done. I am so out, because I honestly thought I was going to kill myself. And that's when I made my statement public. And after that, it sort of got a bit sort of normal, with the exception of then I lost my job at Sage, which I loved. It was the best normal distraction that I had at the time. So it's been interesting.
And you were, just to clarify, you did lose your job at Sage for reasons directly related to your whistleblowing.
Yeah, I had volunteered to resign because I didn't... Look, for somebody who was sitting with this monkey for 18 months, the last thing I was going to do was give it to somebody else. And with what was happening with KPMG and the press and all that kind of that time, Sage didn't choose to be involved with me and my drama, so to say. And I just didn't want them to have to go through something that they didn't deliberately choose. So that's why I resigned.
But I think Rebecca, that's quite, I mean, I think Bianca has a lot of heart, and she really tries to kind of bat for the employer in this case. But I think what it also shows is we need to create an enabling environment. And as we've seen with the original Nenegate whistleblower, Mosilo Motepo, it became totally unpalatable to employ such a high-profile whistleblower. It's like, oh God, you know, she would send a CV, she would maybe get a call back, she would go for the interview, nail it, but they wouldn't hire her, you know, because there was just too much of a political risk in some cases, she was told. In the case of Sage, regardless of whether Bianca offered to resign very generously on the day that she goes public with this massive dossier, right? She says, look, I've kind of embarked on this journey. You hired me knowing that, but would you like me to go? You know, because I would. I don't want to make things uncomfortable. And for the company to go, for any employer to then go, yeah, you know, I mean, please. I mean, we simply can't get away with that. The stakes are too high. And state capture, beyond the Guptas, I mean, corruption is way beyond the Guptas. If we want to encourage and foster a culture within which people feel okay about coming out and helping, you know, to improve the quality of lives of all South Africans, and poor South Africans in particular, we've got to find ways as corporate South Africa, and I think, Gabby, that you come across that quite a lot, as corporate South Africa, to say, hey, we're not just going to tick a couple of boxes and go, okay, well, we kind of have a hotline that Deloitte or whoever's running. We're kind of doing all the right things, but we don't really want to deal with the messy stuff, you know? So, I mean, would you agree that that's kind of quite a big thing?
Yeah. I think, you know, everybody reads these articles and is amazed by both of you and think, oh my God, you guys are so great, and then step away and go have a cup of coffee and carry on with their lives. We're not creating safe homes for whistleblowers, and that starts with organizations. Whistleblowers are an absolute value and credit to organizations because they uncover the rot. And there's a lot of economic value on that, but there's an ethical value in that, more importantly. And you should be creating homes. And anybody who questions also these questions about when people come out, you know, why talk now? Who was listening before? No one was listening to them.
That's right. And research has repeatedly showed that the most successful whistleblowers are not necessarily the ones who expose the most insane injustices, but the ones who managed to tap into a trend at the time in terms of what media is interested in and with what society is concerned. So there is very much that element at play as well.
I mean, I think often, you know, whistleblowers are an indication that our internal systems are broken.
That's right.
Because what should have happened? These people should have made disclosures within their organizations. People would have gone, oh, she's right. They would have followed up, and these women could have carried on living their lives.
Yeah.
You know, it shows us that the systems are broken.
So we've just got 5 minutes for questions from the audience. I hope at least some of them will be offers of highly paid employment for Suzanne and Bianca. No pressure, but there's lots of business people here. Have we got a mic?
Way at the back there.
There's one at the back there.
Hi there, Bianca and Suzanne. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Sorry, I'm very nervous. But what I would like to know from the two of you, how do you cope with the disillusionment? I mean, like you had this idea of what the company was that you were working for, and suddenly you realize that they actually they're not what you thought they were. How do you cope with that disillusionment?
Great question.
That's a really tough one, because you do question yourself whether you were right or wrong the whole time. So in my case, for the 18 months, I wasn't convinced that I was really lied to. You also question yourself, did you imagine it? You know, until things like the inquiry happens. You know, like when the public protector called me, that's when it's like, okay, they wouldn't be calling me if everything was fine. You know, and up until that point that I heard from Trillian investigative team, I wasn't sure still. So it's hard to cope with the disillusionment. It's hard to accept that people would deliberately just use you maliciously. It's hard to accept that the integrated capital directors put me in a position where I could go to jail and leave my daughter motherless, but their children had parents. I haven't accepted it yet. And in some instances and in some days it's easy, but there are certain things when you think of how badly this could have ended for my life, I haven't accepted it.
And I think from my perspective, it's similar because, you know, I was passionate about Eskom. I was passionate, I mean, I must have been the most positive person about load shedding. Well, you know, I was trying to I had this Think Positive campaign going. So it was the biggest disillusionment for me that the people that I trusted and respected were actually using me, you know, and I had to find a way to deal with that guilt, because in some ways you also feel like, oh my gosh, I was party to this, you know, why didn't I see it earlier? You know, all those questions go through your mind. You're like, oh, you know, and you have to deal with comments like, she was part of it, she, you know, things like that. So I think it's really difficult. Like Bianca, I haven't yet come to terms. Yes, I've sort of parted ways with Eskom, but I haven't yet come to terms with the people and the issues for me. You know, now when I read about what the other executives were up to, I think, geez, you were taken for a ride.
Yeah.
You know?
See the next one. Questions? We've got one in the front, some in the back. Who's doing the rounds?
Good morning, ladies. I'd like to make one statement and ask one question, and I think they both touch a little bit on sexism. Firstly, I'd just like to state categorically from my side that there's been more balls on stage today than there has been in the rest of the room. And secondly, to both Bianca and Suzanne, I'd just like to know, do you think that there would have been more resultant action had the whistleblowing that you two undertook actually been done by a man who had some influence in the political or business sphere? Or do you think it's simply a matter of our country not responding to things the way they should be once they're exposed?
Look, for me, it's irrespective. I think, for me, what I felt is that the state failed us. You know, as a country, this is not what I gave up school for. I mean, I come from Cape Town. I lived through the school boycotts. I lived through running away from Casper's. What I realized is, this is not what I fought for. You know, this is not the democracy that I wanted. And to go to Parliament, to have so little action, you know, and the MPA saying, we still have to investigate. Guys, what do you need to investigate? There's investigative journalists who's given us information. There's people like us who've given you information. Start doing something to get our country back, because I don't feel we got our country back.
What she said?
Yeah, exactly what I'm there.
Whistleblowers agree.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I'll leave it to Jess for a concluding remark on the way forward and what we've heard.
Yeah, two things. Public sector corruption is huge, but so is corporate corruption. Corporate South Africa can't really kind of, you know, sit back and pretend that it's not their problem. You know, it spills, it intersects, and it spills over. Except that you have a bigger responsibility towards people in your organization or elsewhere, for that matter, who want to alert you to wrongdoings, etc. Something fundamental happened in my sort of inquiries about, you know, for information about this panel. We've got another very high-profile whistleblower, Themba Maseko, who, as of recently, is unemployed, like many of the whistleblowers. Themba's recently discovered, in his quest to re-establish himself, you know, that he's now a politically exposed person. And this was, you know, during the normal course of trying to rebuild his life. He was trying to apply for finance, to carry on, and I'm speaking of this with permission. Corporate South African banks ditched the Guptas and probably hordes of other politically exposed persons. Much has happened, just like Suzanne Daniels, Bianca, Mosila, Motepo, and others have come to realize the power of the Guptas, the power of state capture, etc. One would assume that a banking institution would be familiar with Themba Maseko's situation. So it is quite bizarre that someone like that could suddenly land up as a PIP. And it's little things like that that we just seem to overlook. You know, whether it's a bureaucrat in the back room or a banking sort of official just ticking a couple of boxes, we ought to be more alert. That's kind of my bugbear for today.
I think that's all we have time for, but I think on behalf of us all again, we'd like to thank our whistleblowers, both for joining us and, of course, for your duty to the country.
Wow, okay.